Hello everyone and welcome to Life with Aprons. I am in my kitchen today and I want to show you guys how you can make sourdough pizza balls. These I use at least once a week. They're easy to whip up and you just let them sit all day. You can freeze these and pull them out at another time. I love this recipe. Join me. All right, let's get started. Of course, the base of our sourdough pizza crust is going to be our sourdough starter. Now, what I like about this recipe is that you don't have to have an active sourdough starter. It's not necessary. You can actually use discard from your sourdough starter. Sometimes I use an active one, sometimes I don't. If you want a good rise out of it, if you want it to be really fluffy, the sourdough starter needs to be a little more active. And that just means you want to feed it 2 to 6 hours before you use it and make sure it has all those wonderful bubbles inside of it, and that lets you know that it is active and ready to go. I'm using 2 cups of sourdough starter. Now, this recipe that I'm giving you, I tailored it for our family, and we are a family of 8, so it makes quite a bit of dough. You don't have to use these measurements. You can half this recipe. Or you can use the whole recipe and then you can freeze the balls. I like to make a bunch and then measure it in 16-ounce balls and freeze it until I'm ready to pull it out and use it on another day. You're going to want to add 3 cups of water and you want 4 teaspoons of salt. I'm using a sea salt here, and that is what I use in really any recipe I have that calls for salt. I like to use sea salt. You're also going to add 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Obviously, I'm measuring right now. I've done this recipe so many times, I just kind of eyeball it, but this olive oil is important because it helps give you a soft dough. I'm going to turn on the mixer here and begin adding my flour. This recipe calls for 8 cups of flour. I know that's a lot of flour. You're going to want to continue adding the flour in until it changes consistency and the dough begins to pull away from the bowl. And you can see now that it is starting to pull away from the bowl, and so I'm going to let it run for 10 minutes. That gives it enough time to knead and get ready for our next step. I'm going to add a little bit of extra flour here because sometimes when you mix it that long, it does tend to get a little sticky, and you don't want it too sticky, but you don't want it really hard either. You want it to be able to be workable, and you can see I'm sticking my hand in there and it's not coming off on my hand, but it is a little sticky, and that's fine. I'm just going to take out my dough hook, and then I'm going to cover it and let it rise on the counter all day until it's about doubled in size. It will double in size, and then I'll head on to my next step. Make sure that you cover the dough because otherwise you'll have a crusty hardness over the top of the dough. You don't have to cover it with a lid on your mixer. You know, you can cover it with a wet dish towel, but just make sure you cover it with something so that the air doesn't get too much to it to where it makes it hard on the top. All right, my dough's been rising for about 8 hours, and now it is time for me to roll it out. You can measure each dough ball to make sure that each one's the same amount. I just kind of eyeball it and scoop it out. When I do put it in the freezer, I do measure it just so that I have an even amount. But I'm just going to take some of that dough and flour my surface so that it doesn't stick to my rolling mat. I'll sprinkle some more flour on there, and then I'm just going to roll it out and get it nice and big. Sometimes it might be a little difficult to work with and might not want to roll out really well. If that happens, just pick it up and just begin to start stretching it a little bit. Don't stretch too much because you might tear it, but you want to stretch it some, and that'll help kind of get a little bigger, and then you can begin rolling again. Once I've got my entire dough rolled out, I put a piece of parchment paper over and flip it over. And then I do another quick roll to make sure that it didn't shrink back up in size. And I am going to take this pizza crust to the oven. I like to pre-cook my crust before I start putting the toppings on. So I'm gonna put it in our toaster oven right now because I have a double oven, it's not working. So I'm gonna put it in this little toaster oven and it'll do just fine at 400 degrees. And I just wanna cook it until the crust begins to cook, but it's not fully cooked. And that's it, the crust is finished. You can decorate to your heart's content and put whatever you want on your pizza. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I hope it takes a little of the intimidation out of sourdough pizza crust. It really is one of the easier things in my tool belt that I can pull out anytime. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.